Getting better reviews on Steam is always a good thing, right? Not only does it mean that your players are more satisfied with your game, but it also boosts you in the Steam algorithm. So how do you actually get good reviews? And you might be thinking that it's as simple as just making a good game, but getting good reviews is not entirely based on the game being good. I mean, yes, that's super important, but even more important than that is the players' expectations. It sounds super basic, right? But it may affect you more than you think, since it affects nostalgia-based games or games with really heavy inspiration an immense amount. Like, for example, let's look at Koromon. Its mechanics are so close to Pokemon that someone who's unfamiliar may think it's the same series, and I mean, the name tells you a lot of what you need to know. It has good ratings though, and that's mainly because it marketed itself as a Pokemon-like, and it didn't stray away too much from that at all, except to appeal even more to hardcore players. If they marketed themselves as a Pokemon-like, but then added some sort of turn-based combat more like Final Fantasy, the reviews might not have been as good because of the mismatch in expectations. The Final Fantasy players might be a bit disappointed that the game's not more like Final Fantasy, and the Pokemon players might be disappointed that the game is not more like Pokemon. So you have to be really careful when combining genres, and sometimes it might be even better to not even mention the games that you're inspired by. And I think a good lesson to take away from this is that if you're making a game that could be perceived as a spiritual successor to a beloved series, do everything that you can to highlight the differences, even if you feel that they make the game better, because people may be playing this game to get more of what they already like instead of getting something more original. When you review on Steam, it's not like a number rating, right? It's a thumbs up or a thumbs down, so you want people to come in and give them what they came there for. So you want the people that actually play the game to get what they expected so that they can give the game a thumbs up. A lot of games can have a 6 out of 10 rating in somebody's head, but because it's exactly what they were expecting, numbers on Steam will be positive. On the topic of marketing, if you're making a game and you're posting about it on socials and it's just not really getting the traction that you needed to get, all hope may not be lost. For example, let me show you this really cool looking game. I'll put the link to this post in the description. And on December 22nd, the developer's posts were averaging about 120 likes, but then after December 24th, all of the game's posts are going viral. So what changed? Well, to me it seems like somebody who's not really in the game development sphere of Twitter quote retweeted a clip and put a joke, and the game reached the gamer audience instead of a game developer audience, and the rest is history. The thing is, many games are only interesting to a key subset of players. Like for example, Valheim is an incredibly successful game, but when the developers started posting about its development, it barely got any traction. The issue was obviously not the game itself, it's a great game, but rather the game had not found its audience. So if you're finding yourself in a similar situation, try to figure out a way to expose your game to an audience that is very different to that which has already seen it. You might just have a hit on your hands and you would never have known if you hadn't tried to branch out a bit more. One piece of advice that I always hear is that you should be putting up a Steam page for your game as early as humanly possible. And actually this is true for most games, but there's a point where this is no longer the case. You see, this is something that not a lot of people know, but Steam's algorithm highly favors wishlist velocity. So that means if you suddenly get tons of people wishlisting your game in a short period of time, then Steam will show your game to more people within the platform. And on that topic, my game Synthbeast has a Steam page right now, so go wishlist it to help me out. So basically, it's way better to get 10,000 wishlists in a few days than the same amount over the course of a year. Makes total sense, right? But it's exponential because of Steam's featuring. So if you feel that there's no real way for your game to get a huge number of wishlists on the launch of the Steam page because you haven't really made a proper name for yourself as a developer yet, then yes, it's probably better to just put up your Steam page as early as possible and start earning wishlists. But if you're a bit more established, or maybe even you've released 1 or 2 games, it might be worth it to wait for an event to get tons of wishlists on announce day and possibly get high wishlist velocity to really benefit your game. Making games for Steam is almost nothing like making games for other platforms. Players on Steam have a very clear preference for some genres. Like, for example, you can see in this graph that strategy games perform amazingly on Steam, and RPGs do well too, but other genres like puzzle games or platformers really perform below average. On console, however, the numbers are super different, and other genres do better. The problem is that Steam is a much better platform to release on for indie developers because of not only the wishlist system that allows you to be boosted if you get enough wishlist velocity, but it's also much cheaper to develop for because there are no ports. So the reality is that it's actually easier to be an indie developer of some genres than others. So even if you're a platformer developer and you choose to release on console, you are at an inherent disadvantage because it's more expensive to port your game to those platforms rather than just focusing on a PC version. So if you enjoy developing in multiple genres and are struggling to choose what game to make, then maybe try to make something that appeals more to Steam players, so if your game doesn't do as well as you expect, you don't bankrupt yourself due to porting costs. There's this famous story told by Zelda creator Shigeru Miyamoto that he was inspired to create games by his exploration of caves and nature when he was a kid. And what's funny is that he also said that when he chooses designers, he tries to go for people who aren't super passionate game fans. So he actually feels how they should have more interest than just video games. And at first, I thought this was a bit strange because you'd want to get people who are super familiar with design conventions to be able to work within the medium the best way possible, right? But then I played Crusader Kings for the first time a few years ago, and this completely clicked. Crusader Kings is a game series that's so history focused that it would be absolutely impossible to make if designers didn't have an incredibly deep understanding of history. Without understanding what it was like to live as a ruler in the game's time period, it would be impossible to know what kind of systems to design for the game to evoke what it does, and in doing that, it manages to innovate immensely. Another obvious example is a game called Jusant, which is all about climbing, and I can guarantee that without designers with an interest in rock climbing, this incredibly innovative game would never have existed. For myself, Crusader Kings 3 sparked an interest in history that turned into an interest in linguistics and ancient culture, and I feel like whenever I am making a game that allows me to express my other interests, my full potential is unleashed. This video has been super different from what I usually make, but I always try to keep my game development advice as grounded as possible and unique to my own experience so that I am not just echoing what others say. If you liked it and you would like me to make more in this format, let me know what kind of topics you'd like me to touch, and we'll see if maybe I can make this something more frequent. And if you'd like to support me in developing my games, both of my studio's games are on sale right now because of the winter sale on Steam, so check them out in the link below. I've also got them in a bundle which allows you to get them for stupidly cheap, so check that out if the gameplay that you're seeing here interests you. I've also got last week's video up here on the screen, so if you want to see how I make levels for one of my games, check that out. And that's it. That was the last video of the year. I'm super excited to show you all what huge projects we're working on for 2024, and I'll see you all next week for the first video of the year. Bye.